Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of our series Meet the Founder. If you are new, this is our second installment and we have the founder of Permission to Write, Ashley Coleman. Hi Ashley.
Hey, I'm happy to be here with you.
I'm excited that, first of all, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm like outrageously at capacity, but I am
Mhm.
I am well considering all that we've been through the last 2 years,
I
2.5 years
know.
almost.
And it
So
feels like we still low key going through it, but we don't want to go through it no more. So everybody just act like we ain't going through it, but I'm the only one I feel like we're still going through something.
we absolutely are. But it's a little bit better than March 2020. I gotta say that.
Yes, it
Yeah.
most certainly is. So we're here because our Meet the Founder series was something I thought was very important because we have a lot of these community organizations and organizations for Black writers, readers, authors, and it's just like who runs these organizations? And I wanted to like kind of lift the veil a little bit to get the founders of these organizations that's been out for like 2, 3, 5+ years, and it's just like some people know who runs it. Some people don't. Some people think it just miraculously get updated and things just come together. So I'm like, I wanted to shed a light on you guys because you all make this community function, go round and round. You bring creativity to it. You help people. So for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about what Permission to Write is and how you what gave you the idea to start it. And then also what made you keep going with it? Because that's like a big order to fill.
Oh, it is big. And first, I just have to thank you for all your work in this space for Black readers, Black writers, because it's probably one of the things that helps keep me going.
Well, thank
um,
you.
yes,
Same, same.
yes, is knowing that there are other amazing folks like you just giving of time and talent in order to elevate the things that we're all doing. So Permission to Write really exists as an online and before the pandemic in-person community. That works to really amplify and cultivate the voices of writers of color and Black writers, right? And so, one, I feel like at times it's important to make that distinction because Black writers and POC writers are sometimes just facing like different challenges. But we are a welcoming community to all marginalized voices. We
Mhm,
do our work through a myriad of like a paid membership program, our mentorship program, and just like social media and different activations and kind of just bringing people together. So we do a lot to not only like give platforms to marginalized writers, but also to help them among the education portion of it. How can they be better writers? One of the things I realized was that a lot of times we admire great people like Baldwin and Morrison and
mhm.
all these amazing writers, but they're not given the same opportunities to discuss craft as like
Yes.
other writers. And so I just felt like it was important to not only be able to revere work from marginalized
Mhm,
writers, but also to like get their input. What's their approach?
mhm,
Because a lot of times we hear about great books like On Writing by Stephen King
mhm,
and Bird by
mhm,
Bird by Anne Lamott and things like that. But where are our staples from
mhm,
marginalized writers? So that was really part of the onus behind it. It kind
mhm,
of started with a study where
mhm,
I was doing research on building a business plan for actually a bricks and mortars space.
mhm,
And when I started doing that research, I saw the Lee and Low study, I think from 2015, that
mhm.
essentially said that 88% of publishing was self identified as white. And
Wow.
so I just thought, well, if the gatekeepers aren't really like
Mhm,
connected to our stories, then how are
mhm,
we really going to elevate them? And that was honestly just why I'm into creating the things I want to see. And
mhm.
so that was how Permission to Write was born in 2017.
Got it. So first of all, that's a lot of work. I'm just like, okay, you thought of all of that. So how long did you have the idea to start Permission to Write? And then
Mhm.
how long after did you create it? Because I think that's like I always feel like when I'm talking to people who have ideas, they have so many ideas, but it's like I've had this idea for like 5 years, 3 years,
Mhm.
7 years. But it's just like what gave you that idea? Like, you know what, I have this, it's this space, I see this gap out there and I know this could be popping. So I want to create
Mhm.
it. But then it was just like, oh, how long did you say, all right, I'm going to give myself X amount of time? Or did you kind of push it off for a while? And what motivated you to actually do it?
That is a good question, just because I feel like, sometimes we do stall, but then sometimes I like to, because I am also a person who has a lot of ideas, I
Mhm,
like to categorize ideas as what's a right now idea and what's
mhm.
not a right now idea,
Got
right?
it.
So sometimes it is okay to have an idea that is really like forward thinking. So even
Mhm,
in reference to that bricks and mortar kind of space, that's
mhm.
something I absolutely still want to do. It just wasn't a right now idea.
Yeah.
So actually, I think it wasn't that much time between, like, because I was working on this business plan. It was almost like I pivoted to say, okay, what I can do right now
Mhm,
though is like set up space. Um,
mhm.
and so that really started with me kind of like reaching out to a bunch of writers I already knew to figure out who could help me do it. What we
Mhm.
started as was actually a journal, so like a
Oh.
quarterly journal. So at first,
Mhm,
the idea was kind of just creating a literary journal where we could feature
mhm.
people's writings and do stories about different writers. We had the great privilege of having like Lucy DeZelma, Joelle
Wow.
Leon, and
Yeah, yeah,
Gigi
yeah.
Renee like on our covers first. And very quickly I realized that was a very expensive type of not just in like money, because a lot of people were willing to give up their time, but just in time, right? Like the time that it takes to put together a journal being expensive, right? In a sense of the time people had to dedicate it to it. So we kind of did that right off the bat. And then after maybe about like our fifth or sixth issue, realized like, okay, what are the other ways we can kind of show up, until maybe later, right? We could get the funds to like pay all of our writers and editors and et cetera, and really have a team and a staff behind it. So I don't think there was a lot of time between the idea and execution, because I'm actually more of a person who jumps off the ledge and builds the
Mhm.
parachute on the way down. So a lot of times I will just jump into an idea only to realize like it's either harder than I thought, or like
Mhm.
I need to make some changes and pivots. I think that's just a little bit of a natural part of my personality. So I'm actually learning how to like take more time with my ideas now than just diving
Jump
off the
right
deep
into it.
end.
But I think
Yeah.
sometimes jumping into it, it'll give you that space to kind of just, I always feel like you'll get help. Like one of the like the affirmations I have on my wall is like, if you just start, God will send help. I always like have it because I'm like, sometimes you get so like locked up into everything. If you give yourself so much time to think about it, I mean, you have a
Mhm.
plan, but sometimes we try to get everything so perfect. So even you just jumping and just saying like, I mean, out because regardless, if you plan for everything, something is still going to happen that you didn't plan for because we just don't know. So sometimes that jumping into it can like really just give you that just to go. So I don't think it's horrible. I just think that, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that I like people who do that. So
It's a balance, right?
yeah,
Like,
it
so
is
because I
about
think that
I feel like you always want to have somebody on your team who doesn't do that. So they can
Mhm.
kind of bring it on home. Um,
Yes.
so when thinking about your community, how your community would look in the beginning, what was something you knew had to be there because Black women largely made up the community?
Hmm. I guess like immediately off the bat to me, it was just like one like safe space, right? So
Mhm,
that was like a huge thing for me of like making sure that the community could be very vulnerable and
mhm,
safe. Because I just feel like a lot of times when you talk about Black women, there's not a lot of spaces we can show up and feel like safety. And
mhm,
that's just wow. Like, you know what I mean? Not just
mhm,
our physical safety, but just like for our ideas, just feeling encouraged,
mhm,
supported. That was kind of a big factor for me.
mhm,
Um, I guess the other thing too was just trying to make sure that I was authentic as possible in who to bring in to like help, because I
mhm,
think like a lot of times we like don't want to be exclusive, because I think like that's what we run into, right? Like
mhm,
people not letting us in, but at the same
mhm,
time, like how do I make sure that people understand like this is a space that exists for Black and POC
mhm,
women and men really, but we just skew towards women
mhm,
naturally. I'm a woman, and so that it happens. But um yeah, that was something that was important for me as well, was kind of like just making sure that I did my best to exhaust my possibilities with POC and Black folks before
mhm.
inviting in allies, like we kind of like to call it, like, you know what I mean? So just making sure that I was uh not in a way trying to be like too inclusive in a way
Mhm.
that didn't make it feel like it was a space specifically for marginalized people.
Got it.
Mhm.
So the part of permission to write that stuck out to me the most is the mentorship.
Mhm.
Well, tell me a little bit more about that. And then what made you want to create a space where writers could get help more on a consistent basis? Because we've seen like a lot of communities that are creative organizations, websites, or, people who promote like, okay, if you want to publish, if you want to do this, but like the mentorship program to me is something that's more ongoing because it's not like, okay, once you publish a book, then we're here for you. Or once you say that you're a writer, then we're here for you. It's like the whole process. You guys are here from whether you're interested in having a literary agent, the marketing, to even just creating a space where other writers can link up to co-writing sessions, like all of that. So what made you say, I want to do something where mentorship was like at the forefront?
For sure. So essentially it came from me not having a mentor.
Yeah.
And so that was literally the space that it came from. I come from a music background professionally, right? So
Mhm.
a lot of my full-time work, and for many years has been like rooted in the music industry. And I had really great mentors when I was first starting out in the music business, and just different men and women that really came and helped pull me up, teach me things and give me opportunities. And one thing I realized when I really wanted to pivot kind of my uh, other part of my career, because I hate calling it a side hustle, because I just
Mhm.
feel like I both write and work in
Yeah.
music. And so when I really was trying to figure things out that way, like I just didn't have anyone to help me in that space. You know what I mean? And I was like, how do I even go about like, I think I even sent some cold emails to writers that was just like, hey, I'm just looking for a mentor, and really didn't get a great response. And
Mhm.
so, again, just being a person who really believes in putting the things in the world that you hope to see, I was like, all right, one of the things that I did always have, I feel like in writing, was peer mentorship.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of a big thing for me too, because although we clearly welcome people farther in their
Mhm.
careers, we also welcome people who have reached out to us and said, well, I'm not sure if I'm like at a certain space,
Mhm.
but like I am willing to help. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, come, because I'm still learning a lot. And I just share, like I kind of really like lift as I climb too,
Mhm.
right? So I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna let you know everything that's happening
Yeah.
in this process as I'm coming forward, in hopes that it will help you. So that was really how we wanted to kind of model the mentorship as well.
So, in your opinion, what do you think is like one of the things that holds like writers back from taking that leap to even just like, because before you were like, because you got a book coming out, we're gonna get to that. Before you were like an author, you had like your regular blog, you posted, like you wrote and you just did that. So, what do you think? Because some people can't even get to that. They're like, I want to start a blog site, I want to write about my experiences, I want to share my short stories, but it's just like, what is it? What do you think that is?
So it is literally the moniker to my organization, which is giving themselves permission to write.
Mhm.
Right. And so I know, it might seem corny, but I somewhere along the way, I
Mhm.
realized that that was actually the mental block that people were having in order to do
Mhm.
the work that they wanted to see. And
Mhm.
so a lot of it is literally just we have, I think, like as a society, as a community, like we've all kind of made writer into this very like heavy
Yeah.
thing to like consider ourselves or to call ourselves.
Mhm.
And I think the second that you give yourself that permission, you can open your world up to like, all
Mhm.
right, bet. So once I can just say that,
Mhm.
then now what's possible? And so yeah, I literally just think it's the ability to kind of get over that mental block.
Mhm.
And then it's just discipline. Like, I know we all been making jokes about
Mhm.
what's in the world about who wants to work and who doesn't,
Uh-huh.
right? And so although that is not my thing, because I feel like a lot of us are dealing with many different experiences, whether we
Yeah.
have kids, whether we're taking care of elderly parents, whether we're in
Mhm.
school, we have real life stuff that can be a hindrance to us. But I think some of it is really just like the discipline to do it after you get over that kind of initial mental block of like, you're a writer, whether you do it
Mhm.
professionally, whether you only write in your journal, you're a writer. Like,
Yeah.
you can tell yourself that. I think once we get past that, it's really about the consistency and the discipline
Mhm.
to do it. Much like you talked about, how do you keep going with an organization? Well, sometimes it's going to look great, and sometimes you're going to be like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But you know, it's a little bit of a crazy belief that you're doing something worthwhile, and it has to
Mhm.
be the same way with your writing, that you're sharing things that are worthwhile and important to put out into the world.
So, being that you're at the forefront and you run this space, and it just seems like, okay, she has everything together. She's been writing, she's been doing this. She ended up getting, how do you make sure that you encourage people while also not like, how do I explain sometimes when like someone comes to an organization and they're very new or they're very green and they have like a confidence issue, right? And then they see you because they don't know your story. They just know what you already accomplished. And
Mhm.
they're just like, well, dang, if you're already there, sometimes people's achievements can make them feel smaller or like it shouldn't be that way. But how do you encourage them when you have like new writers coming into the space where you have other writers who are actually more like they've been writing, they've been holding down sites, they've been freelancing, they've been doing that, so that they can feel welcomed and not feel kind of defeated. I know it's a personal issue, but at the same time, it's always that like you can sit with us. Like, how do you create that environment?
Yeah, I think that just comes with being honest, like to
Hmm.
me, you know. And so even with the fact that in our membership community, like I do a weekly newsletter called like The Craft, where we talk
Hmm.
about just various different topics in regard to
Hmm.
writing. And so a lot of that, I'm like literally telling them the actual real life examples of things that I'm going through, things
Hmm.
that are still challenges for me. And I think a big part of what helps that is lifting as you climb, because I think a
Yeah.
lot of times when you get to a certain point you kind of forget some of the steps, and what
Yeah.
I've done is really welcomed people along all the steps
Hmm.
so that like it's not far from me what it feels like to get my
Hmm.
first edit letter, because I'm kind of
Yeah.
sharing it in real
As
time.
you go. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that a big element of our community is just like that honesty to be like, "Whoa, I was confused about this," or you know, whatever the case may be.
Hmm.
And just I'm just a bit of an open book in that way. And I think in the past, in my personal life, I've experienced people thinking you have it all together, and I think that has been a learning thing of that break. Like in
Hmm.
my own life, I have had to
Yeah.
break it open to say, "Y'all, I'm not perfect,"
It's not, yeah, because they
you
put you on that
know.
pedestal and it's like, girl, if you only knew like how
Yes.
this stuff keeps rolling out. This I'm
Yeah.
at the skin of my teeth. But also then how do you stay inspired yourself when you're like inspiring others at the same time? Because it's like, okay, I have this community of writers who are looking to me for help. Even if they're not looking to you, they see you as the person who runs and steers the ship, right? Even if it's a group of you guys. But at the same time, it's like I have to make sure that I'm reserving energy and creativity for myself. And then, you have your responsibilities, but your own personal life, your own work outside of writing.
Mhm.
How do you balance that?
Man, like it's tough. And I think that's kind of like a misconception too, is like recently multiple people have asked me like, well, how do you do it all? It's like,
Mhm.
I don't know. Like, you know what I mean? Like there is no like I don't even consider myself the most organized person. Like
Mhm.
sometimes I really get things done very haphazardly.
Mhm.
Like, I work a lot,
Mhm.
and some people don't realize that. So part of it, I think, because in just the spirit of honesty, like there have been times I wanted to quit Permission to Write. I wanted to be like, I can put this down. Like this is just
Mhm.
something that I decided to do
Mhm.
that really like is to help other people, right?
Mhm.
Like it doesn't necessarily like, serve my selfish interest in certain
Mhm.
ways. And so, but at every point that I felt that way, I
Mhm.
was actually most encouraged by the people who are part of the community. And they didn't even know that
Yeah.
they were doing it. They were just like,
Yeah.
oh, this happened in my career, or thank you so much for
Mhm.
this, or talking to this person who was like, oh, I've applied for so many mentorship programs and no
Mhm.
one accepted me as a mentor. Like
Yeah.
that is the step. And they were like, oh, of course, a Black woman, because they were a Black male. They were like, of
Mhm.
course, the organization, run by a Black woman would be the first one to really invite me to be a
Mhm.
mentor, to other writers. And so it has honestly been those moments that are literally like, I feel like they always come when you're like,
Mhm.
I can't do it. I
Mhm.
don't have enough resources. I don't have enough
Mhm.
this. I don't have enough that. And those have been like some of the most encouraging moments, in addition to just having my husband, who is a very strong support system and also a creative. And so we spend a lot of time talking to each other off ledges, which is very real. You know what I mean? When you're pursuing
like,
careers
girl,
in
you gotta
creativity.
keep going.
Yes, like, and that has been just such a strong force for me. So I also just feel like I'm into things that are bigger than yourself. And so just making my own career would be great. But to me, it's almost like an asterisk if I'm not helping other people as well, which we've seen the results of that from like us writing every Friday, and folks are coming in like, I got an agent. Folks are coming in like, I finished my book proposal and I have a book deal. Like, that is the stuff that I'm like, this is necessary if it's helping people get to where they want to be.
Yeah. First of all, I feel you on the wanting to quit thing. That's a whole nother story. But because it's hard, it's like, and then you realize, like, so when you first created Permission to Write, because this is what I often tell people, when we did Sistah Girls Book Club, I think we didn't know the potential, what it could become, even though it has so much more potential. And like, we're real, like I always say, we're now, and it sounds bad because it's like, well, what was y'all doing from all those years ago? I feel like we're catching up to what it is now. Like, we finally got a grip, like, oh, this is bigger than, oh, I like to read a book. This has become like a community and also like an organization. And like, we're putting money out and we're doing this and we're doing that. So how long did it take you to catch up to sitting there and being like, oh, snap, like this is a whole situation for real, like, and then
what year is it?
And did you feel the pressure to kind of just be like, because it was a one point that I can like pinpoint, I won't say it now because this is not about me, but it was just like, oh snap, like, okay, this is different. This is not just posting on Instagram. This is not just saying that, oh, we like to write and we like to read, and it now took on a different meaning. And then once it did that, I got really, really nervous. Not nervous in the sense of like, I can't do it, but nervous in the sense of like, okay, it's not just you. This is not just about you. Now you're holding other people's time, money, all of the other stuff in your hand. And it's like, you have to be very intentional about that. And it was very nerve-wracking for a little. I was like, okay, and it still is. But so my question to you is, did you realize that moment? Are you in the moment now? And if so, how have you been processing it?
Yeah, I almost feel like the last year I've been in that moment of like, oh, okay. And one, I want to earmark how important it is to know that like we're coming into 5 years in. So like if you are starting something, like just know like it takes time. Like you can't start something in year one, assume that it's just gonna be this thing. I think a lot of times that's the assumption. Sometimes social media warps that for us because we think like, oh, somebody went viral and then their organization blew up. But a lot of times that's just not the case. It really takes like years in, to your point. And so I feel like I'm in that now. Like, and that really started with like folks reaching out to advertise in our newsletter, or like realizing I had like real deliverables for people, like to your point. Or like, researching some of the folks that wanted to be mentors. I would be researching them and be like, oh my God, like they have a book, or they, they're a legit journalist, or whatever the case may be. And then really wanting to be involved, and then like even just getting to a point now where we're like, publishers are reaching out to us to interact with their authors of color. Like, these are all things that like, yeah, I want to be a go-to, for when you're looking for a specific space, and we're becoming that. Like that was always the goal. Like, how do you become like, oh, I want to reach mostly Black women writers. Where do I go for this thing that I want to do?
List of that,
and you be on the list. And so that was one of my major goals. And I feel like we are only now 5 years in, with the ebbs and flows of become and just at the beginning of what that can be, you know what I'm saying? And so, but that I feel like I'm in a really good moment of just figuring it out. It is a struggle because I don't have a lot of help. So people have come in and out to help, but that kind of consistent, like somebody that's just really down for what I'm down for and kind of being able to split the work, I don't really have that. And so, I feel like moving forward is really trying to like slowly but surely figure out what that looks like. Like what does like real consistent help look like? We've had great interns. We have Lysandra Janae, who helps us with our membership community and engaging in our Slack and things like that. So amazing people who, you know, kind of have really stepped up. But just looking at what some real consistent help looks like, I think is some of our next goal. For sure.
Yeah, that is so dope. Like, I sort of feel like I remember when you started Permission to Write. So for those who don't know, we knew each other before, like both of our own like organizations taking off and even having it. And I'm just like, but when I knew you just had all this energy and you maintained it, right? And the personality and the grace and just like even having the wisdom to share yourself when you're not healed up. You're like, yo, I'm looking for, because I get the emails and I read them newsletters. I'd be like, she's looking for a new literary agent, or you tell this was the process or how you felt. Or I remember when I read specifically that touched me was just like going back to the basics. You had made like an error in like writing something. He was like, sometimes I got to go back to the basics. And we forget that people who've been doing this for a long time, even they have to go back to like, all right, let's go back to the gym. What are the basics of like, how do we use that semicolon again? Where does that comma go? You know, or even just learning how to be around people and work with people, right? Because it is a community situation, right? Right. So that's the next question. How do you monitor personalities? Like, did you get it from your day job and then you rolled over some of those talents to this organization, or did you have to develop it as you went along, and what did that look like?
Yeah, I think one of the best things about working kind of like full-time and more of like a corporate structure is definitely all of that kind of training that you get. And so I have to credit it to that. Just one, like, you know, realizing like, oh, what I was actually creating really mirrored my full-time job, which technically is a nonprofit. It's just a huge nonprofit with a multi-year deal with a major network. You know what I mean? So it's like, but for me, it became, okay, now how do I really do that to scale, right? Like, so Permission to Write is this tiny thing, but like, what are the things that I can take from that? So even just things of like how our mentorship program works, like some of that is, just based on understanding of how our mentorship program works with our like college level students, and like how, they interact and how to make it a good experience for both the mentors and the mentees, et cetera. So, and just to your point, the people management, like so much of that has come from just working with a lot of different people. It's a big team. I work in a pretty big department. It's a lot of different personalities that you have to try to navigate and manage when your personality is very different. So that has been, to me, just a major help and a major way to be able to kind of translate that experience. So count it all like important, because sometimes I feel like specifically our generation, we're like, well, I don't want to work a full-time job and I just want to do my art and my creativity. But it's like all that stuff is still working for your good, because everything that I'm learning there by working for a place that's been around a long time and has a lot more structure, etc., is all just teaching me important things for whatever I do, whether it's in Permission to Write or outside of. You're still learning very important skills that can help you.
Yeah, and I think that is so true, because I always tell people, like, because we have our event Behind the Pen with authors coming to New York City, and at that time I become a glorified customer service agent. That's all I am. Like, I answer phone calls and I like send emails. That's all I do. But I do credit that to when I was like outside of college, like not outside of like summertime in college. We get your little summer job. I worked at a call center in the summertime. So that level of just having like irate people and just knowing that most people get very upset when they cannot have their way, and how to like just navigate through that. So what you're saying is so like true, like everything works, because that was I was like, what, 19, 20, like, hello, such and such, trying to do this. And even the persistence, because at one point we had to like call people and get information. They're reluctant, they don't want to talk to you. But it's like, when now you're asking for money and stuff, it's like, girl, I've been sitting here with a grandma who was about 75 years old, and I called her in the middle of her stories. You telling me that you're annoyed, trust me, it's not gonna stop me. Right. I way more. So I think that a lot of people need to know that too, that it all works together. And I think that a lot of times what we see is that glamour part, like the glamorous, like the social media, the images from the events, or even just like, that person is being a mentor and they want to be a mentor this time and they're not asked this time. So they just feel like, oh man. So how do you make sure yourself that you let people within the space know that it is work? Like, it's not just snapping pictures and saying like, I'm gonna put a reel of me typing really quickly and being like, another day on the grind, like working. And it's like, girl, you spent more time on the reel than you spent actually putting some time into the project. So how do you make sure that, especially with newer and younger, specifically Gen Z, coming in, to make sure that they actually have to put that time into their craft, do the research, and really sit down? Because a lot of times we can't really just sit still.
Mm-hmm. That's a tough one, because I will say that I think Permission to Write skews a little bit older.
Mm-hmm.
So Permission to Write tends to skew more like 30,
Mm-hmm.
or no, I'm sorry, 24 to 34,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like is a little bit older than like
Now
the
24, they still just like, mm-hmm.
yeah, 24 is still starting out a little bit.
They still on
Right.
vibes.
Oh, exactly. Some of that is like, my husband calls it, sometimes you have to let people go to the desert and come back. And it's so
Okay.
true, because he's a musician and it's very similar, where like working with artists a lot, they just
Mm-hmm.
want things to happen like quick,
Mm-hmm.
fast, and in a hurry. And a lot of times you're trying to really tell them things and guide them, and they're like, I don't care about none of that. I want what I want. And so it's this concept of like, you have to go let them spin their wheels,
Mm-hmm.
to a certain extent. It's almost like parenting, where like you can tell your kid everything, but there is going to be a certain element that they have to learn on their own, that they're not going to be able to take from you. So to me, it's just similar of just like, look, I can tell you what the steps are. I
Mm-hmm.
can put everything out in front of you. I think it's also really important, and why we have the membership community is to have not only kind of like a person that's kind of seen as like the instructor or the person kind of like at the lead, but to
Mm-hmm.
also be able to have your peers. So we have like within our membership community, we have a Slack, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times folks are posting things in there. It helps other younger folks realize like where the balance is,
Yeah.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
like where they sit in the standings. So they might be like, oh, I need to get better at this. I spoke to someone recently about like my writing group that I had started in Philly. It was through Permission to Write, because it was pre-pandemic and we were doing different like writing groups in different cities.
Mm-hmm.
And so we had, of course, established one in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
And I tell everybody, everyone in that group was better than me. They were all better writers than me, by happenstance. But what it helped me to do was say, okay, this is great. This is now I know how I need to step it up to feel like I'm as good as them. And of course they'll be like, no.
Mm-hmm.
But like it was just myself reading their stuff and being like,
Blown
okay,
away,
let
like,
me
so let me step it up.
get
Let me
this
get a little hour.
together.
And
So
I
I
think
think
that's
it's a
so
big
dope. Yeah.
thing to put people together
Mm-hmm.
with other people that
Mm-hmm.
aren't just them looking at me, but
Yeah.
putting them with other folks kind of like above them at the same place as them, and then some
Mm-hmm.
people that might be trying to get to where they are.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense, obviously. So let's get over onto your writing career, because we ain't just gonna spend all the time on Permission to Write. So one of the things that I want to talk to, one is that you've been writing for a while. So what inspired you to become a writer? And then how did you go from I'm inspired, I want to write, I started a site and I write there, and now I'm a published author? Like, how did we go? And you did it traditionally published. So that's the next thing. And that, because a lot of people like, indie is really big, and like people are doing so many dope things as an indie author. And so
Yeah.
what made you not do indie? Well, you did indie for a little bit, and then you transitioned and then got, that big pub was like, yes. So what was that experience like? And just walk us through that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I have a story much like most other writers,
Mhm.
where it's kind of like you were always a writer, but you just
Mhm.
really didn't know or
Mhm.
understand
Mhm.
kind of like what that meant, or
Mhm.
how to really like make something of that. And so
Mhm.
I am definitely a person who always had journals. I still have like
Mhm.
really young journals where I was just
Mhm.
writing about boys I liked or whatever the case, but
Mhm.
nothing of real substance.
Mhm.
Um, I started writing short stories when I was young, just with like makeup things. And so that was really part of the journey. Probably my most pivotal point to understand that it was something I could actually do was in high school. One, I went to a magnet school in Philadelphia, which is kind of like, which just means that like people come from all over, and it's not just based on like the neighborhood you live in. And so we had different types of classes. I had a creative writing class. I did really well in that. And then at graduation, I had won a short story contest that was kind of like, you had a bunch of objects and had to make up a story about them. And that was so cool. And I like won money for it at graduation. And I was like, this is amazing. Like that was definitely like a pivotal point for me to be like, wow, maybe this is something I could do. In college, I started as a journalism major, realized I really didn't want to write news because that was just a little too boring for me, the who, what, when, where, and why. And so that's when I kind of made a foray into music. And then also around that same time realized like another way that I could get my words out was through a blog, because initially my first blog was actually, I just wanted to tell stories about the music industry because people were so ridiculous. Like I was just having all these experiences and meeting all these different people that I was like, I need to write about this.
Characters, full-blown characters.
Characters. And so that was honestly the first foray into like online writing, that later became Write, Laugh, Dream. And then like building an audience through that blog was the onus to self-publishing a couple of my own books that were nonfiction before kind of making the foray into like traditional publishing and switching genres, because the self-published books were nonfiction, and then like my forthcoming book is fiction. So
what made you go to fiction? First of all, congratulations. I got a copy of the book. I got it. I'm excited. Good morning, love. First of all, what made you go into fiction? And we are in the music industry, and I'm excited because I always love to read about music industry based books with music. That's, I don't know, it's just one of the things I like. So what made you go into non-traditional, not non-traditional, sorry, non-fiction, and then take the route of saying that you wanted to get traditionally published and not just like do it as an independent author? And what do you feel like? Do you feel like it was a good decision? Do you feel like, well, it didn't matter, or it will matter with your writing?
Whoa, those are all good questions. So I started in nonfiction just because it seemed like a natural progression from the blog was to like compile things I was writing about on the blog. So that was kind of really the point behind self-publishing my own nonfiction stuff. But I've always been a creative writer. So I almost feel like I probably always was going to write fiction. It just kind of took me time to get there. And the decision to really kind of like make that leap was like, I always wrote short stories and had trouble kind of like finishing a book length thing. And I actually went to apply for a fellowship where you needed a 20-page sample. And I had come up with this idea because I feel like Good Morning Love is really like iterations of other stories I've probably written before in my mind, kind of, you know. I feel like that tends to be what it is for most people's debut. It's like a story you've been telling yourself for a long time. And so I had written this 20-page sample for the fellowship. I didn't get into the fellowship. And then I was like, you know, at first I was just kind of bummed about it, but then I was like, oh, what if I just keep going, you know, with this sample that I wrote? And it was the first thing that wasn't a short story. Like I felt like it was actually like a book length thing. And then like once I got it to a space where I was like, okay, like maybe this is something. Again, jumping without a parachute, I was like, well, let's just try to get it published. And that really, and I think because that's always been a secret dream of mine. Like I always wanted to see my books in like bookstores everywhere, you know what I mean? And things like that. And so I was like, well, let's just try it. And then knowing that I had the skill set to publish my own book, I just felt like if this doesn't work, I'll just put it out myself. And your book club really introduced me to other writers who were doing amazing things, like Jacinta Howard and Nia Forster, and like different folks that were doing like amazing work on their own,
all by themselves. I'm like, what made you say, well, let me go after traditionally like a publishing house? Did you feel like you had to do you feel like, because this is like always a question that I think runs rampant in our space,
Mhm.
do you feel more accomplished if you get traditionally published? Do you feel like that is the stepping stone, or is it just about getting your book out to a lot of readers?
Okay, so I have to say that it definitely feels I definitely feel something that
Mhm.
people are willing to invest in an idea of mine, because at the end of
Yeah.
the day, it's a business, and that's
Mhm.
what they're saying. They're not just saying, "Oh, we like you," like, you know what I
Mhm.
mean?
Yeah.
And they're not even saying, "We think you're the best writer ever," right?
Mhm.
Like, so you
Mhm.
kind of have to take it with a grain of salt. It's kind
Mhm.
of just saying like, "Hey, this could be commercially viable." Now, in that, I think you have to have a certain level of skill to
Yeah.
write something that's commercially viable. But I think it's kind of just keeping in perspective, like what they're saying is we think this is a good business decision. And I would be foolish to say that that doesn't like
Mhm.
help your confidence as
Mhm.
a writer, right? To be like, other people want to invest in this. But I will say that when I first self-published Your Love and we sold out a book event in Philly and I only ordered 50 books,
Mhm.
that was something that also meant just as much to me, that people would show up for me, that people
Mhm.
cared what I had to say, that I ran out of books and people were
Mhm.
like, "Why would you only order 50 books?"
Yeah, I was about to say 50.
And I was like, because my goal, y'all, was so small. And like to
Mhm.
that point of like, God has way bigger things
Bigger
for
plans.
you.
Yeah.
I literally felt like if I only sell 50 books, I will feel good about myself. And
Mhm.
then so I just ordered 50,
Mhm.
and we went on to sell more than that. And no, it wasn't in the hundreds of thousands, but
Mhm.
even just saying I sold 100 books or 200, but
Mhm.
I don't even know. Like I couldn't even tell you how many I actually sold because I didn't really
Mhm.
track it.
Mhm.
But I know I sold out of that 50 and I know we
I
sold
know
more,
that's right.
right? Like, and so honestly, like just people like caring about what I have to say
Mhm.
is the real prize.
Mhm.
But I don't want to take away from to me what it means that also, a big five publisher is willing to invest in my idea. That
Yeah, I think
also
you said that
it helped.
perfectly. Yeah, I think that was perfect because I think it's something when somebody invests in you and then also knowing that they're putting the money, like they just like, yeah, girl, we believe in it. We gonna do this. And
Because
I
people
think,
can say they do all day,
yeah,
right?
and they
But
don't
it's in the
really, and it's like, yeah,
action.
girl, we believe in you, girl. Keep going, girl, keep going. And these are strangers. These are not like your homegirls or your family, and stuff like that. And I think that now because people can do it independently and they're doing it so damn good, it's just like it just becomes a thing of which route do you want to take. Or if you want to go
Absolutely.
hybrid, like where do you want to go? But I always want to ask authors that because I always feel like you get two different, it's different answers, or the different reasons why they chose one route over another or doing both of them at the same time. So one of the things now is like, how much do you write like yourself now? Because you have so much going on. How do you have time for your own creativity and just like making sure that um you don't give everything else or you don't have enough for yourself? Like how do you like gauge that barometer? Like where you like, okay, I did enough for this and I'm gonna do this for me and then I'm gonna do that. How do you do that? Or how have you
Yeah.
been doing it?
I mean, to me, I prioritize it,
Hmm.
right? So it's like my creativity is important. So it's a priority. So a lot of times, writing specifically for me is like one of the first things that I do. So if I'm
Hmm.
looking at my schedule, yeah, I work a 9 to 5, right? And so, what does that look like? Well, it looks like I get up pretty early and, I'm blessed to have been in a space for a while now, actually pre-pandemic, to have worked from home. So I have no commute. So
Hmm.
that means that if I wake up early enough, I
Hmm.
can get writing done.
Hmm.
And I tell people all the time, like my first book, I really got a lot of that legwork done for the first draft, 30 minutes at a time. You don't need a lot of time. You just
Yeah,
need consistent time,
and the focus
right?
time,
So
yeah.
and focus time. So I literally would set a timer for 30 minutes, put my phone on do not disturb, and I would write for 30 minutes. And you'd be surprised how much you can get done when you're not scrolling Twitter or getting text message
Mhm.
notifications. You can get a lot done. So that's really like, I try to prioritize that as best I can because there's a lot of writing that I'm doing. So it's like I'm trying to, I wrote another story. I'm working on a work in progress. I'm trying to like also get into screenwriting. I'm writing for TV and film. So it's like there's a lot of writing that needs to get done. So I try to like do that first and foremost. We also have our PTW Power Hour, which means that
Yeah.
if somehow I don't get to write all week, I
Mhm.
know that for 1 hour on Fridays, I'm going to carve out that time to get
Mhm.
to write, where we hop on Zoom, listen to some music, and get some work done. And then I try to really prioritize like things I have to do for permission to write kind of like in the evenings. Because a lot of times things I have to do, you talked about admin and clerical for like permission to
Mhm.
write, they take
Mhm.
less brain power than like
Mhm.
writing. So I
Mhm.
can do those after I worked 100 hours in a day. I can kind of knock out some of those tasks and like
Mhm.
weekends, being
Mhm.
flexible where I can kind of like dig in. But you know, sometimes things suffer because um I would love to for us to be more active on social, because sometimes I look and I'm like, whoa, we barely got followers and other people's orgs have such much bigger followings. Like, why
Uh-huh.
don't we have the numbers? And it's
Mhm.
partially because I'm not as consistent because I
Mhm.
don't really have a social media person.
Mhm.
So you know, I've tried to like in instances when I'm in a really good flow, I'm batching. So I'm actually
Yeah.
like prepping things for permission to
Mhm.
write like weeks in advance. So I'm planning out like 10 Instagram posts
Trust me,
and
the
I just have
batching
to throw them
helps.
up.
The batching, like, it
Yeah.
saves lives.
Yeah, so that's a big way to,
Mhm.
even if it's just ideas, because for
Mhm.
our membership community, I do a weekly newsletter. Well, it's hard to write a newsletter every week.
Yeah.
So, but one thing that I do, I keep a running list of ideas. So
Mhm.
I'll know, like, even if it's not written, I don't have to be conjuring up what I want to write about. I'll just
Mhm.
have like a list to pick from and be like, okay, do I want
Mhm.
to write about world building, or do I
Mhm.
want to write about building your author platform, you
Mhm.
know? So those things are helpful too, but it's crazy and nothing about it is easy, you
Yeah.
know? And then I work a lot. I was just joking with my husband about how a friend of ours was like, y'all just like working. And we were like, I like maybe we do because he's working all the time. He works for
Yeah.
himself. And I just know that in addition to my 9 to 5, there's things I want to do. So
Mhm.
I can't just use my job as an excuse because
Yeah.
I gotta do that to eat. But
Mhm.
then these dreams gotta get fulfilled
Gotta count.
too. So we
Yeah.
gotta do it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I feel you. So what is your hope for permission to write in the future? I don't want to put a time because people like 5 to 10 years, but what is like the hope and like
Mhm.
when people say, all right, well, I was a part of permission to write, I got this from it as you grow.
It's already happening,
Mhm.
which is just amazing. Where
That's
people
so
are like,
good.
"I'm
Yeah.
putting you on the book acknowledgments," like, and I'm just like, you know, that really makes my heart smile.
Mhm.
Just of people feeling like, you know, it just helped them get to where they were trying to be.
Mhm.
You know, I often talk about like this gentle hug that we all need.
Mhm.
Like I hope that it's that. Pushing forward, you know, we want to see you know, I really want to open a bookstore that's also a writing studio that
Mhm.
will hopefully be under the Permission to Write moniker, where we could, you know, have again just that incubator
Mhm.
of writers being able to be around each other, also
Mhm.
being able to like sell independent authors in addition to traditionally published. That's a big thing for me. I would love to see
Mhm.
us be able to kind of have that space, and to hopefully be able to see an imprint at some
Mhm.
point where we're able to really publish and put forth stories that we believe in and support them monetarily,
Mhm.
as well, which is just a big thing for these type of organizations. Like we don't we want to be able to put money in people's pockets
Mhm.
too, at some point. So those are like the big lofty long-term goals,
Mhm.
but in the meantime just being able to for people to be able to say like coming here on Fridays is my best thing, or it
Mhm.
helps me do this, or my mentor was great, or you know, this membership community is worth, you know, what we pay into it.
Mhm.
All of that is kind of like the short-term gratification and real goal for
Well,
us.
that's amazing. First of all, I love Permission to Write. I've always been like a super dope fan. And so I'm so
Thanks.
happy for you and your whole team. So congratulations on keeping it
Mhm.
together and keeping I feel like the mission first, right? I always feel like there are organizations that start with like a mission, and then after a while, it's like, well, what happened to y'all? You know what I mean? What happened?
Right.
What went wrong? Why is there so much? What's going on? But I feel like with Permissions to Write, you've stayed the course and you've grown, right? You've added things on. So just congratulations on that. Congratulations on the book. Well, it hasn't come out yet officially. Am I correct? It comes out
Right.
this summer, right? In June. So we're
Yep.
gonna have you back. You gotta come back to talk about just the book. That's why I want to dive too deep into the book. Like
Yes.
I'm reading it. It's dope. I ain't gonna say nothing else, but
It is all good. I'm excited for you to have it. Thank you so much for inviting me here to talk about Permission to Write. And again, just ditto, like I just love being able to exist in a space where Sistah Girl exists as well. Just to kind of like, I don't know, it's a great encouragement. Same with Well, We're a Black Girl and just all these other spaces that are doing like amazing things. It's great because I feel like everybody has their own lane at the same time.
but we
But
always recognize each other's dopeness. Like I see you, girl. I
exactly.
see you, girl. So if
Yes.
anybody wanted to like be in, because you got the mentorship, you got the master classes, you have everything under this one, organization. If I were new to this space, and I'm like, all right, I watched this interview, hopefully, and now I want to become like a part of the hive. Like, what's the first thing that I need to do? Tell them what they should do and where they can find you.
Well, sure. So I guess the first thing to do would be to sign up for our general newsletter. So the first step would be to go to permissiontowrite.com. Everything is spelled correctly, spelled as is. So permissiontowrite.com. I would make sure you're signed up for our monthly newsletter, which, just tends to have information about everything we're doing. That's the best place to be plugged in. Make sure you follow us on social media. So our Instagram is at Permission to Write. Our Twitter is at Perm to Write. Y'all know how Twitter be doing us with these handles, y'all. It's tough out here in these streets.
We got Sistah Girls BC, so I get it, girl.
It's hard trying to get that consistency sometimes. So yeah, honestly, most of the people who have either like worked with us on the back end, if that's your interest, or just become a part of the community, have all really kind of like tapped in through social or through our newsletters. So those are the best places to get in. And then of course, we're hello@permissiontowrite.com is our email. If you're just like, hey, I want to help with a portion, always open to that as well. Just as we look to continue to expand and grow and just be more impactful, you always just need more help, more folks kind of willing to jump in. So feel free to also reach out that way as well.
Well, thank you so much, Ashley. This was such a great conversation.
Yes.
And I'm excited to see where everything is going to go. I know it's just going to blossom and grow. And like I said, you're sitting at the forefront of just one day when it's like, how we had the James Baldwin group, we like, dang, what conversations did they have? What was like in their space? And like you and just so many other writers and just community, it's like y'all are gonna be the ones like that when we're older, they're gonna be like, dang, I see these pictures with these organizations, like what were they doing? You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, this is so dope. Like I wonder what, Ashley and this person, that person, because we see the pictures outside, we're like, damn, what were they thinking about? Or what were they laughing about? What was like motivating them? And then I feel like this is our time, this is our space, and we're doing it, and we have so many more resources, and we have each other, right? And no matter what time, space, wherever, we're building these communities. So I'm excited.
Same. Very
Thank
excited.
you again.
Awesome. No